Would you please put a face on these fundamentalists? And I don't mean this rhetorically. I live in a very sheltered environment in Boulder, and I don't actually see these people. I hear about them in the news. You've talked a little bit about these in your lives and in your work. Could you just tell us a little more about these people? Where do you see them? How do you interact with them?
I'll put a face on one of them, and that
Mark,
is
you need to talk in the microphone.
one of my favorite listeners. In fact, her name is Vicky. She lives in upstate New York. She believes that the Bible is the inerrant Word of God. She is virulently against any allowance of abortion. And this is a woman who can be very kind to her neighbors and her friends. And it's interesting that she actually listens to my radio show, mostly because this is an open-minded fundamentalist Christian who wants to hear from another side. In that sense, I guess she's not typical. But it's very interesting because I have really pressed her on her beliefs, and I've asked her if all those frozen embryos that are left over from fertility clinics, if she believes that those are thousands of human beings imprisoned waiting to be freed, and whether she would advocate women giving up their womb and so forth to free them. And she has said yes. So okay, well that's, but at least I made her think about it a little bit. These are people, I want to emphasize, most of these people are not going around burning down gay bars. They're not. They're trying to raise their families, and they're looking for the security of this absolute truth that the Bible gives them. And in that way, it's kind of hard to hate someone who's simply looking for security. The problem is when they use the absolute truth as they know it to punish others. I don't care what people think about gay people or abortions or Jews or blacks, or if they keep it to themselves and they don't go out and persecute others, that's their right. The problem is when they use their inerrant belief to persecute others, and that's what we have to prevent.
I noticed that among certain Christians there's this great fondness for condemning other people as not Christians, even though they have been baptized and they are on the rolls. Could you comment a little bit on this tendency and what it does?
You're looking at me.
It's always easier to blame others than to blame yourself. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, why look at your own adultery when you can look at your neighbor's kid's homosexuality? You look at it in a Christian context, I look at it in a Jewish context. One of my favorite passages is from Micah, where the people are fasting, they're pretending to be good to God, they're fasting, but they're actually doing evil to their neighbor. And God says in the words of Micah, "What good are your fasts to me, O man? I've already told you all that I require of thee. Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with thy God." And to me, it's really not that difficult. I mean, Jesus said, "Let he who is without sin throw the first stone." And who did he hang out with? Lepers and prostitutes. Right. He didn't hang out with the rich guys that gave to the Bush campaign. He just wasn't there. So, particularly when you have the marriage of the religious right with the moneyed corporate right, yes, you would think they would be natural enemies. And it's interesting, William Jennings Bryan was a Democrat 100 years ago, and he had all kinds of views, actually some racist views that I certainly wouldn't defend. But one thing he did do is he stuck up for the common man, he stuck up for the poor person, and he did so because he saw it as a religious duty. Yes. And there are many, many people, Christians, Jews, lots of Christians, Jim Wallace, people on the left, lots of Catholics, who I disagree with on abortion, but really care about the poor, really are concerned about, and that, if there's one thing in the Bible that's absolutely clear, Old Testament, New Testament, heck, it's even in the Apocrypha, it's look out for those that are disadvantaged. Yeah. And all you have to do is look at the two parties and say, which party is more Christian in that respect?
A lot of these people are people who don't trust the government, but somehow they want the government to teach their children what to pray. And Jesus said, when you pray, go to your room. And I've never understood how they can reconcile it. Is this a bunch of charlatans, as Mr. Levine
they can't reconcile it.
Or they just don't read
like
the Bible, as Mr. Wixman said? Or
it's just like the coin example. They can't reconcile it. What they really want is for everyone to pray the way they want them to. I will tell you this, though. The Supreme Court has allowed, and I support this, voluntary prayer after hours on their own time. You can meet in a room after school. You have the drama club. You have the prayer. You have the Gay Straight Alliance. All of that is perfectly allowed and should be under the First Amendment. You should have the right to free exercise. What you shouldn't have the right to do is force everyone in a room and say, this is the prayer. And I completely support that kind of voluntary after-school prayer or silent prayer. Silent prayer doesn't harm anybody as far as I'm concerned. But in essence, when the state has to give the words, everyone wants their own words. Let me just say, I'm a supporter of the state of Israel. I have been for a long time. We can talk about that in detail on another panel, maybe next year. There's no question that there is a sector of the Christian right that is supportive of Israel for a very interesting reason. They believe that when all Jews go back to Israel, Jesus will come again. Now, for an American Jew, that's a little unsettling. It's like, thank you for supporting Israel, but I'd rather stay here. And so I think you have to be careful, even if you are a supporter of Israel, as I am, about people who ally with you for the wrong reasons. Right. Lots of people have a spiritual vacuum in their lives. Lots of people are spiritual people. Lots of people are religious people. Lots of people are good people. I think there's an easy way, right? And you can look at it in law, you can look at it in religion. And that is, my right to throw my fist stops where your face begins. Right. As long as someone isn't harming someone else, leave them alone. That's sort of a basic principle, and then people can believe it. So to me, how I define where religion is wonderful and teaching of a tradition and giving you a way of viewing, a philosophy and a way of looking at the earth, and when it is oppressive, it's very simple. When it starts affecting someone who is not you, who is not of your religion, who doesn't want to be affected that way, that to me, pardon me, Chip, is extreme. I would actually argue that while I certainly have no problem in love, family, folk, spiritual religion, I have no problem with institutional religion as long as it doesn't impinge on my life. It's that simple, or on someone else who doesn't want it. I think it was Justice Brandeis that talked about, live and let live. We have a right to be left alone. And the real problem with the religious right is when they don't leave people alone. And one more thing I think that should be said is that I know that the people at CWA tried to find someone from the religious right to sit here on this panel, as I think they should be, because you should hear that view, and apparently they wanted money to sit on this panel. And I don't happen to think that's part of the New Testament, but I guess that's up to them.
So I want to ask the last question here, and kind of give you a chance to make some closing comments, but in my opinion, the reason why this is so topical is not because of the religious aspect of it, but because of the influence of the religious right in our political arena today. And let's face it, we've had Quakers and Mennonites in our country for a long time. Haven't had this conversation about them really. So my question is, have we become a theocracy to some degree? Is that a problem? And we're still a democracy. They got there through the democratic process. So what's the problem there?
This country is not a democracy. It's based on this document called the Constitution of the United States. And this document says the majority doesn't always rule. I'm a big fan of the Constitution. And what it says in the First Amendment trumps any majority rule, which is Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. I think we should be concerned if you could democratically choose a religion. I think we sometimes have to be concerned with excesses of democracy. We've seen some of those in the Middle East. Clearly, one's personal and private beliefs should not be up for majority rule. And to the extent that they want to make it so, we have to fall back on this lucky founding document that protects the minority against the majority. One last thing I should say. We've talked a lot about how religion can harm government, can harm others that it doesn't belong to. There's no question about that. We've talked at length. I want to point out that government can also harm religion. That when you have a faith-based initiative and you say, often to a poor African-American minister, we will give you all this money if you do X, Y, Z, support the Bush administration and so forth. Then you have not religion impinging on government, but government impinging on religion. Government-sponsored religion is very dangerous and has been in numerous examples throughout history, throughout the world. Just as I want a wall preventing the church from infecting my state, I also want a wall preventing the state from infecting my church. Thank you.